I run a lot of groups and I write a lot of different articles, but this is kind of a subject matter that is new to me verbalizing and putting a language to. So pardon if I reference my notes a little bit more, but this is something that I'm really impassioned by. As I mentioned in the part one webinar of making lasting changes either in your life or your relationship, or even exploring if your partner and the relationship dynamics can change, I am always exploring what language, what types of therapy, what type of interventions help people make lasting change. And of course, I am assuming that a lot of people that chime into these types of webinars, either watching them live or on YouTube, are in a state of deep pain. Maybe they've been victimized by, those that they've trusted the most. They're struggling with betrayal trauma. Often the people that are watching these feel like their relationship isn't very healthy. It's not going anywhere. They're struggling from a lot of sadness and hurt and pain. So experiencing change is a pretty high priority in their life, because the status that they're in now is very, very difficult for them. So today we're just going to be exploring that topic of change. Basically, I have a lot of clients. I work in addiction, and I work in outpatient settings, and people who have lots of years of recovery or just newly beginning to try to recover, or maybe lots of years in substance abuse recovery, but then find that they have other addictions in gambling or spending or love and sex addiction. So I find there's a lot of people, or I come across a lot, where they've maybe had years of, let's say, substance abuse sobriety. So they've not picked up the drugs and alcohol, but they might still be, not truly recovered, because they are maybe still acting out to some extent. They might still be using and manipulating people. They might still be lying regularly. They might have rage issues or passive aggression, or a lot of unspoken, unprocessed resentment that affects their interaction with other people, or they just might be plain old miserable. So yes, have things changed? They are alcoholics and they're not picking up alcohol anymore. So that's absolutely changed. But the big question is has enough changed? So there are two kinds of changing that I think happen, or the ways we tend to approach change. There's the behavioral changes. So I will act in a different way. So again, to reference the alcoholic, he has not picked up alcohol, and that is a behavior change. He or she might attend 12-step meetings. That is a behavior change. Maybe understanding that alcohol was a problem in his or her life, behavior change. But there's this more lasting change that is so much more difficult to accomplish in life. And I don't quite have a name for it yet, but to describe it, it's this kind of deeper, emotional, spiritual, soulful change that occurs. And I find that one of my greatest challenges on a personal and professional level is figuring out how to help not just myself, kind of always being on that continuum of healthy change, but help others or convey to others how to achieve this deep, longer lasting emotional, spiritual, soul change. So not just those superficial kind of like behavioral changes. Behavioral changes, to me, the metaphor that I like using for behavioral changes is almost like a bandage on a wound. It's an absolutely important and functional first step, but it is not the main part of the healing process. There's a need for it, it helps, but it's definitely a surface level way of dealing with the wound. The wound is actually healing from within, and it's only with time that the wound heals. And so that's kind of the metaphor I use for behavioral versus deeper, longer lasting emotional and soulful changes. So again, with people who are in this deep state of struggle, let's say for those who are in betrayal trauma, and maybe they're working on reconciliation, so they're making these behavioral type of changes where they're going to therapy, they're doing disclosures, they're processing maybe their childhood stuff, if they're kind of doing that work, but they're on the inside still in deep, deep pain and struggle with hurt, anger, shame, intimacy, fears of vulnerability, deep, deep soulful issues. So just a little background of where I come from in trying to explore how to create this type of change is I was in my own kind of personal struggles when I was working for a treatment center that was dealing with mental health disorders and addiction. I'd heard and been exposed to 12 steps throughout my life. Growing up, we had a close family friend who was an alcoholic who would regularly attend meetings and found recovery through that. And then conversely, I had another alcoholic friend who completely loathed and hated that he was being sent by the court to 12-step meetings. So, you know, throughout the years of my early years of working in mental health, I came across people who were hardcore 12-steppers who deeply believed in it. And then almost the same number of people who just despised it for just a long list of reasons. And a lot of people who would leave treatment, you know, because there was talk of 12 steps and a very impassioned anger and hurt against 12 steps. And I found in my early years of that I had many misconceptions and misunderstandings of 12 steps. General, just kind of like there was this weird allure, like what was this 12 steps, this like 12 isms, you know, these 12 belief systems or 12 lists of magical things that might help someone get relief from this extremely devastating and mind-boggling disease, which is addiction, right? Because addiction is essentially stronger than my desire to live, stronger than my desire to keep my family, stronger than my desire to live a life in line with my value system. This addiction is so powerful that it just cancels all these out. That was just so mind-boggling to those that didn't struggle with that same addiction. You wonder what's the magical piece of this like 12 steps concept that's triggering that. But really through my walk, I found that I follow my own, or in my own state of struggle, I was following my own false or kind of counterproductive isms, maybe not necessarily 12-step isms, but I was certainly following some kind of program for my own version of happiness, my own version of thinking I was in control, etc. The words, and they were imbued in me through maybe my childhood, my upbringing, my culture. The words I used for my counterproductive program was, you know, I had a lot of shame, I was highly defensive, I was extremely passive aggressive, I would walk around with a lot of righteous indignation. So all these things that I didn't quite realize I was struggling with in my own version of my own counterproductive program. And it was making me miserable. Russell Brand, if you've heard from him, he's a little controversial, but he's a pretty famous British actor who found recovery from drug addiction, sex addiction. I think a year or two ago, he wrote a book called Recovery. But one thing that he said that I kind of like his language for is he explains that all of us, all humans, are running some kind of program already. You know, whether it's a religious construct, so how you operate and the values you work within due to like the religion that you were raised in, or a program based on your cultural filters and biases. or the behaviors and choices that are based on your childhood wounds or patterns. Like, the language he uses really made sense to me to say that we already are running some version of ism, some kind of program. Richard Rohr, who I really like, and I'm reading this book right now, he talks about how we're all addicts. Human beings are addictive by nature. We're addicted to our own habitual way of doing anything, our own defenses, and most especially our patterned ways of thinking and how we process reality. So those who might struggle with substance abuse or gambling or sex addiction, those people are displaying the most visible form of addiction. But most humans, most of us, and all the normies, let's say, those are the people that they label as, not addicts, we just might be more creative at hiding our addiction, because it's kind of culturally okay. So maybe we might have unhealthy relationships with food. We might have an unhealthy relationship with performing, so needing validation by, working 60, 70 hours a week to our own mental and physical detriment, or looking a certain way. So we'll withhold food or work out or things like that. Receiving affirmations and achievements, so I like the terms cash and prizes for things because I need to be honored and validated for what I've done. Or we'll look to relationships and be really wound up and caught up in the drama or the intensity of a relationship, and be addicted to that. And then absolutely, certainly there's a level of addiction that can come from religion. Actually, it was Richard Rohr who said that the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's certitude. And I think what he's trying to say by that is that a lot of the religions are supposed to be based on faith, on the fact that there's no evidence, but we aren't comfortable with the uncertainty and open-endedness to it. So we may become addicted to making what is unknown, what is, the uncertainty of this world, we try to control it and make it more in our control box. So if you ask me what my big goal is, it's to talk to those people, the people who are living just under the radar. Yes, I love working with people who have drug and alcohol addiction, or difficult or toxic relationship patterns, and obvious depression or paralyzing anxiety. But I also love trying to speak to the people who might be just under that in the symptomology, because addicts or not, we seek out external sources to validate us and help us escape from pain or discomfort, or we feel we just have this constant need to fight shame and prove that we're good enough. So we'll go to overspending, we'll go to achieving, we'll go to getting validation from a relationship of some kind to prove that we are worthy and that we're good enough. The only problem is, where it's kind of the definition of insanity, is that going to external sources to prove that you're valuable and worthy are fleeting, right? Because let's say if my looks are what validate me, if I'm good enough as long as I'm attractive or a certain size, those can go away in a moment. If my job is everything to me, and as long as I am achieving certain brackets of achievement, then I'm worthy enough, that could all be gone in a moment. And then who am I? Where am I? What do I hang my hat on? The metaphor that I use for these concepts is, I feel like we all are kind of floating in this ocean, and it's an ocean of struggle and shame and chaos and uncertainty. But we kind of are hanging our arms on these life ranks that are kind of these external sources that validate us and say, well, I'm enough and I'm safe and I'm okay as long as I have these life ranks. So let's say for me, it's like, as long as I'm maybe like a good therapist, or as long as, you know, I'm married, I'm good enough, or as long as I have my family's love, or I'm a good parent, or again, I'm attractive, or I'm achieving things. These are all like life ranks that I'm holding on to, saying I'm good enough until. And the problem is that when we get hit with adversity, when we get hit with these crises, a lot of those life ranks get pulled away, right? So let's say if I pride myself on being this emotionally stable person, and in this state of crisis, I can't be, because I'm in pain and I'm in struggle and I'm scared. Then you pull that life rank away, and true crisis, true humbling adversity pulls all of them away, and you figure out that I'm either going to drown in this ocean, or I'm going to need to learn how to swim to get to my own safety. And that's kind of where these really big change moments happen in life. So I just kind of want to close with this is we are supposed to be imperfect. We're supposed to be flawed and make mistakes. And when we own our own shortcomings, or the harm or pain that we may have caused, whether it's directly or indirectly, it creates a deeper level of complexity and compassion within us. We can grow from the humbleness that creates. And it's interesting because at the same time, those concepts, it's a design flaw, because when we experience this, you know, this reality that we're extremely flawed and that we're capable of causing harm and pain, it triggers this like shame and this pain in us that makes us want to push it away and avoid it and not touch it with the 10-foot pole. But when you kind of walk into it, your soul can grow and prosper in that flawed and humbled state. So one last thing about the betrayal trauma. I was doing a podcast with Rob yesterday or Monday, and he was saying, what do you tell clients that are in that state of deep betrayal? You know, the person that they love and trusted the most has harmed them the most. How do you even begin the path of reconciling and forgiving that kind of transgression, you know? And I just kind of shared the way that I've learned how to open my heart to forgiveness and compassion. And I found the key is that in order to have compassion and forgiveness for someone else, compassion is not one more whole, more righteous, more better person, someone who knows more and does better, helping another person who's maybe broken or less than. Real compassion, real forgiveness is when one acknowledges how broken and flawed they are themselves, and then therefore they can sit in the camaraderie of that other broken and flawed person, and they can share in the sadness and the pain, and maybe love and support each other in spite of it. So I mean, in the helping profession, I don't think anyone can be a good therapist or a good helper because they know more. And I'm certainly not any better at relationships or recovery than anyone else. But in fact, it's the opposite. The more I own and kind of can sit with the fact that I fall short, that I'm very flawed, and the more I can kind of humble myself and acknowledge that and sit with it, it opens up my heart to love and support those who are in deep sadness, in deep struggle, in crisis. That's real compassion and forgiveness. And that's it for the lecture.
I love that you're on this topic. I went to a meeting last night. I picked up a sponsee of mine, and as we were in the car on the way to the meeting, we were talking about the difficulty of making changes. And then I got to the meeting and it was the same topic. The leader shared about the difficulty of making changes, and kind of the focus of the meeting ended up being core beliefs, which you talked about, I don't think you used the language core beliefs, but the inner beliefs that we have about ourselves that kind of drive our thinking and behavior. And I shared, the core belief for me is I'm a defective person. I'm a bad person. There's something wrong with me. And therefore, if I let you see the real me, you will run screaming from the room. That's a belief I learned early in my life. I'm wonderful, but I'm not good enough ever. Therefore, I'm unlovable. And that drove my alcoholism. It drove my drug addiction. It drove my sex addiction. Because, it was easier for me to escape into a substance or a behavior than to become vulnerable with another human being as a way of getting, my needs met. So temporarily, I just wouldn't feel my needs. It drove my addiction. I've been sober, I've been in recovery since 2000. I've been sober since 2004 from all my addictions. My core belief, I still have that core belief. It never goes away. What I've had to learn is that it's a lie. There's a saying, I'm a neurology weirdo. And there's a saying, neurons that fire together, wire together. And the earlier they start firing together and wiring together, the more deeply ingrained they are. And, we learn these tapes that spin in our little monkey minds and tell us, our shame tapes, basically.
Right.
Really, really early in life. And they're deeply ingrained and they don't go away. What we can do is create a new path. We have to get some new neurons firing together and wiring together and creating a new path. And that's part of the process of making changes. And you mentioned the 12 steps. The 12 steps are one of the ways that addicts in particular learn how to rewire their brains. First we come in, we make the surface changes. We stop drinking, we stop using, we stop looking at porn, we stop cheating, we stop doing all the crap that we're doing. And then we start doing the internal work. You mentioned change on 2 levels, and that's why change is so hard. I thought if I stopped drinking and using and acting out sexually, my life would suddenly be perfect. And it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I had to, work the steps, and I get a tiny bit better at life and relationships every day. And I get a tiny bit more compassionate with myself and therefore others a little bit every day, but it's a long and painful process to make these changes.
Preach, brother, preach. I know. It's like I would love to hear from those listening, because I don't feel like this is discussed enough. If we're speaking in a language that you can hear, because I think we all hear things in different ways at different times in our life. And I can be the greatest orator in the world, but if I'm not using a language that you understand, that resonates with you, I'm irrelevant. And I don't want to be irrelevant. So, I need feedback from those listening that you're really getting this, because I think I spent a lot of years of my life thinking in terms of grocery lists, or like that life was a mathematical formula. If I do 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, it's going to equal, what was that, 4? And I was freaking pissed when it didn't equal 4. That was my crisis, is it didn't equal 4 and I fell to pieces. And then I had to find a new reality that's in life. 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 4, and you need to be able to manage it. And you better have yourself really well grounded. So understanding what your shame issues are, the way you're defensive, what your coping mechanisms are, healthy and unhealthy. And you got to become kind of a master of your stuff to be able to withstand those moments and get through them.
I mean, I would be stunned if addicts are the only people who identify with, shame is the master emotion, kind of, drives the thinking, drives the behavior, and we have to, work through it. And Brene Brown says, we learn shame from other people. So we have to talk about our shameful thoughts, we have to talk about these negative beliefs that usually aren't true that we hold about ourselves. And have other people go, really? I like you. I think you're a really nice person. And we have to do that again and again and again and again to work through them. And I mean, I can only speak from the addict's perspective. I was never the betrayed partner, but I would love to hear, if there are sort of these negative beliefs that some of the partners have that they want to change.
Yeah. I mean, dear God, yeah. When you're betrayed, and I mean, until someone chimes in, I'm just going to go ahead and keep speaking. But it's just like, when you're betrayed, are you talking like that is a amazing surfacer of your weakest links, right? You're in this kind of pseudo safety of like, I'm good enough and whatever enough because I have this relationship with this person. And then you feel like it's a lie. It was all BS when you uncover that, your partner was having an affair or has this addiction. They were leading these double lives, or they were lying to your face or manipulating or gaslighting you, whatever. And you're just like, whew, yeah, it's official. I am not enough. If I'd had sex with him or her, this wouldn't have happened. If I'd made more money, if I was a better parent, all these things, then this wouldn't have happened. Speaking of shame, I'm a huge Brene Brown fan too, and we talk about her a lot in these webinars. But I've always wondered, like, what the heck is the shame? Like, I get the shame thing. I get we all have it. It's not curable. We always have to operate in like a form of shame resilience to try to, do esteemable acts and keep our side of the street clean. So we have lots of evidence that those shame voices are wrong. But Dan Siegel, one time, I was listening to him and he was talking about why he thought shame existed. And he was saying that, as a child, you're egocentric and you're made to, have your family, keep your family in your life for survival reasons. And your brain is developing, so it can't quite handle the chaos of a world outside of just you. So you see everything through egocentric lens of everything happens to me, for me, because of me. When your brain, expands, it kind of can handle a little bit more. But he was saying that, and I might misquote it, but I picked up that he was saying that shame was a voice or an adaptive kind of survival skill that we learn to protect our developing brains. And it's this catch-22, that it's like, if I always view things happening to me, for me, because of me, which is that shame voice that, mom and dad would stay together if you were, a better kid, or if you got good grades, or, there is something wrong with you, because that was your way of kind of fooling yourself into thinking that you had control of this crazy, big, chaotic, uncertain world. And I thought that was a really interesting interpretation. So there's this really difficult balance to achieve when you're helping people make it through these types of crises, where you spend enough time validating the victimization, the harm, the hurt, and the pain, but still helping them to see that. I guess I'll reference another saying that I got from the Option B book was, it's not personal, it's not pervasive, permanent, right? That these are, that the trauma that was done was not done to you because you're not enough or because you didn't do enough. It's because of the own person's, their own struggles. And it's not personal. This is not going to be the story for the rest of your life. And this isn't how all of life is going to go for you. So you will transcend this. And it's often when we can transcend these very difficult times is when our heart and our mind become expanded. So when we kind of knock out one reality, the next one that's developed is much bigger, is much more complex, has these dynamics that you couldn't even comprehend before. And then now here they are.
I'm a betrayed partner, and I love that word. My qualifier and I, my favorite phrase, are 1 year into recovery as of the beginning of this year. Shame has been a huge part of my codependency and my partner's sex addiction / codependency. We both are definitely getting healthier in relationships with ourselves and others. But since we are still so new and rewriting definitions for love and life, I'm finding it difficult to feel secure in this working phase. Any insight for those of us in this phase of recovery?
I guess what comes up for me is that drowning in the ocean metaphor, right? Is ultimately, and this is controversial, so let me caveat this, but ultimately the safety will come when you have found grounding in yourself, and if you have a higher power, maybe a higher power, right? Because the thing I always say is like your qualifier that you have a codependent relationship with is the terms you used. That person may relapse and act out again and betray you again. They may get hit by a bus tomorrow and leave this earth. There's lots of different contingencies that could happen that are outside your realm of control. And so when you find strength in kind of who you are, and again, if you have a higher power and fall on, I know I'm gonna use words that might not speak to you, but that your purpose, your values, and also other passions and people that you have in your life, other things that you have in your life that bring you joy and validation and worth, those will help you feel stronger and safer.
Well, first, let me just say I'm not a huge fan of the word codependence or codependency. I prefer this term, prodependence, book by Dr. Robert Weiss, highly recommended. And he makes the biggest point he makes in there is codependence sort of shames you for loving. Yes, codependence is the way to go. I just got a comment. Yay. Codependence is kind of shaming and pathologizing for, it says, why do you love this person who has problems? Shouldn't you be loving someone else? And, the fact of the matter is we love who we love, and we're attracted to who we're attracted to, and we fall in love with who we fall in love with, warts and all. And, instead of saying, why did you do this? The prodependence tactic is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to take better self-care of yourself? Are you going to set some better boundaries? What are you and your partner going to do to reestablish trust so that you can start to feel more secure? And, I would add that, if you're the betrayed partner, you're absolutely normal to feel lost and at sea and insecure because, you had the rug pulled out from under you. And until your partner re-earns your trust, which is going to take a while, you're going to kind of do this, you're going to feel really secure for 5 minutes, and then, you'll walk past, a billboard that reminds you of, what your partner's acting out partner looked like, or what you think she looked like, or he, or whatever, and you're going to be off and running again. That's normal.
That's kind of well said. You'll feel safe when it is safe again. It's going to be, you're in a very dramatic, difficult, severe state of change. Your reality has been turned upside down. And like you said, you're learning new kind of dynamics of love and life. And the feelings of change are not secure creating. They don't trigger, they trigger the stress responses and the pain responses in our brain. They don't trigger the like, you know, everything's going great, thumbs up. Unfortunately, again, it's one of the most earth-shattering things about the betrayal trauma is the gaslighting, or just like, I thought this is what my reality was. My instincts and intuition were telling me this, and it's all wrong. And if that facet of my life was wrong, then I'm sure every other facet of my life is wrong. You know, maybe I wasn't that great at, you know, X, Y, and Z. And it just can bleed into everything else. And spend some time with yourself and your helping professional to kind of figure out what kind of behaviors and actions from your partner is going to help you feel safe. So, for instance, there's some people who do find trust in being able to use that GPS kind of application on the phone, where they can kind of figure out where their partner is and go, okay, he or she's at work, or she's really shopping, or something like that. And some don't find safety in that at all. And then there's can be the regular check-ins, or attending meetings, or maybe initiating appointments with the therapist, or forming different friendships with different people, maybe other people in recovery instead of the people he or she formerly used to associate with. Do job changes need to happen? Does a dramatic environment need to change? Does there need to be financial transparency? These are all behavioral things, behavioral changes that you can make to, again, help create more lasting emotional, soulful change of you know, he or she is doing these things to help heal the wound, to help heal the harm.
We know for a fact that addicts need to do the surface level changes and then the deeper changes. Do you find that betrayed partners come in, and do they need to make surface level changes? Do they need to make deeper changes? Is there resistance to either of those?
Well, I mean, the webinar I just did right before this, I talk about the natural resistance we have to change.
Yeah.
I mean, our brain waves, what did you say, wires, like, we love the basic normal pathways that our brain, even if it's the definition of insanity, it's at least the insanity we know we're comfortable with, our brain can do with very little oxygen and blood flow. And so we love it. So all change, there's going to be some level of resistance to it.